Okay, it being 6 o'clock, I'll call to order the meeting of the Oregon School District Board of Education. Today is Monday, January 13th, 2020. We are at the Oregon School District Innovation Center. Thanks for everybody for making it early. Invoking the Williams rule that holds that anytime there's a significant sporting event that starts at 7 o'clock, the president has authority to maybe consider starting at 6. There's a college football national championship game. So, anyway, could you call the roll, please?
Ms. Feeney? Ms. Oderico? Ms. Flanagan? Here. Mr. Pankratz? Here. Ms. Bijak? Here. Mr. LeBrun? Here. Mr. Zach?
President, board has a quorum. I have proof that the meeting has been appropriately noticed under Wisconsin Open Meetings Law, and that certificate will be with Ms. Heitz if anyone wishes to inspect that. The agenda tonight is fairly short. We have one potential action item, that is to give direction, if needed, to Anna, who's going to be our WASB delegate next week at the convention, and then information items, feedback report on our student achievement reports, and then the superintendent's report. The board will then move into closed session to discuss a couple things. One is evaluation. That's becoming our period of time where we look at evaluating our administrative team, and then discuss with legal counsel our ongoing conversations about post-retirement benefits. So we will not be reporting back into open session at the conclusion of that closed session. So I need a motion to approve the agenda as posted. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Have an agenda. Item A under the agenda is the consent calendar. Is there any item that any board member wishes removed? Seeing none, I take a motion to approve the items on the consent calendar. Is there a second? Second. I note that we have a number of donations. Jeff Knockreiner in the amount of $2,500 for Prairie View Piece of the Peace equity books. The Oregon Community Bank $5,000 for the scoreboard sponsorship. Anke Boudreau $100 for OMS music program. The Oregon Rotary Foundation about a $5,500 scholarship donation. Gina Jonan $100 for the Oregon Administrator Scholarship. Jackie Hemlong, same amount for the scholarship. AMC Pharmacy Solutions, Inc., $5,000 for the splash pad. Ray Vogler, $200 for the splash pad. Jennifer Way, $400 for the splash pad. The Davy family donated $200 for outstanding lunch accounts. Elizabeth Kiefer, $500 for the splash pad. Oregon Community Bank, $250 for the Brooklyn Elementary Book Night. And then Dirty Ducks Cleaning and Environmental, $5,000 donation for scoreboard scholarship. Those are all significant and valuable contributions to our district, and we thank them for our support. With that, could you call the roll?
Ms. Feeney? Yes. Mr. LeBrun?
Yes.
Ms. Oderico? Yes. Ms. Flanagan?
Yes.
Mr. Pankratz?
Yes.
Ms. Bijak?
Yes.
Mr. Zach?
Yes, motions on the consent calendar are approved. Communications from the public. Board is adopted by policy 1804, an opportunity for members of the public to communicate with the board. Is there anyone that's registered? Is there anyone in the audience that wishes to address the board? Anyone in the audience who wishes to address the board? Seeing none, we'll move on to informational items. OEA report. I don't believe we have any tonight. Thank you. Student report. Hi, Jenna. Exam week, right, huh? Yeah, I note the enthusiasm in your voice. Thanks for coming tonight. What's on deck for tomorrow? Okay. Yeah, good. Anything to report tonight other than exams? Okay. Good luck. Yeah. Action items, WASB resolutions. Next week, the board goes to the WASB joint conference over in Milwaukee. I think most of us are going to be there. It's a great session. As part of that program, there is a delegate assembly, and there are a number of resolutions that have been forwarded by WASB for consideration by districts across the state in attendance. And we usually follow the WASB recommendation unless folks have an issue with that. And so this is the opportunity. We disseminated a summary of the proposals, and if any board member has any direction that they think we should take other than the WASB resolution recommendation, to address it at this time so we can inform on that. Anything over on this side? No, they look all pretty straightforward. Courtney and Troy? Anna, any questions from you?
No, that's right. I don't have any questions. I did notice a few things when reading through and felt like a lot of the proposed resolutions are very much in line with our district values. And I feel like quite a few of these things, in quite a few of these areas, our district is already on the leading edge on some of them related to investment in mental health and social emotional learning and equity, and bringing some training to teachers and staff and administrators and all the people who work in our district on the importance of equity and how to address those issues. So it was just another reinforcement of the great work that this district is doing and the good leadership that we have, reflected in the fact that so many of these resolutions are already being kind of done within our district. So it was just great to see that.
So seeing that we don't have any reaction other than what WASB has recommended, you can proceed to vote along the lines of those. If there are amendments, you're to use your discretion then on behalf of the district. Everybody comfortable with that direction to Anna? Great. Thank you. Okay, that takes us to information items, student achievement report feedback. We had an opportunity a month or so ago to get a report from our administrators. We did this in a 3-hour session, less than 3 hours, to get the report from them. And this opportunity, if we have any feedback, to provide it at this time. So I think I'm going to start over with Courtney and just go through. And then if we have specific to any of the particular administrators, we can come up to the table and we can talk about it. Anything, Courtney?
I don't really have any feedback other than, once again, I'm very impressed with the work that our schools do, that our administrators do, our teachers do, and I think they're fabulous. So I really don't have any specific feedback at this time.
Great. Troy?
Yeah, a couple of things. I kind of reviewed my notes recently, since that presentation was a little while ago. But one common theme, I guess, that I noted was the focus on students' abilities, and really starting that out with the All Are Welcome. Jackie talked about the book that they share with 4K students, and I just thought that was really, really great. And kind of starting kids out, and Jackie talked about how enthusiastic our kids are at 4K, and just kind of noting that that's something that we really are striving to carry through all the way through high school, to keep that passion going. And along those lines, I think identifying what our learners are really good at is a huge part of leading a fulfilling life and being successful in your life. And so I really like the focus of what we're doing on that aspect of kind of teaching our kids what fulfills them. And then kind of carrying that through some of the other schools. Shannon noted some of the challenges that we have as new students enroll and incorporating them into our school community. And I think the fact that we really try to focus on what our learners are good at and what their abilities are kind of really helps bring them into the school community and to be a contributing part of our schools. And also, I think as our students learn to recognize what they're passionate about, what they're good at, when they get to high school and we have all of these great choices, and we talked about the value of those choices and the importance of those, our learners are really set up well to make good choices that are gonna be fruitful for them in their life beyond our doors. So that was I think that was really one of the main common themes that I saw, that I just, as I reflected on those presentations, something that I thought was very valuable. So that's it.
Anna?
Really, my feedback would just be that it's an impressive report card to reflect on the good work that's being done in our schools, again, in our district. It just speaks again to the talent that we have with our staff and our leadership. And it's just something that really makes me feel proud to be a member of this school board and have my kids in this district filled with so many passionate, wonderful educators and staff. So just my feedback is I am so impressed by this school district, and that's the bottom line.
Krista?
I have three things. One is, when I first came on the board, I think some of the feelings were we were doing really good things, but we were kind of changing year to year, and with the investment in Rickabaugh and the learning, that I think we've really honed in on what's really important. It's this growth model that's academics as well as social emotional learning and the whole child, and really working on the levers that really make the difference, and teachers moving from here's what I teach to student-centered learning. And I think this annual report really reflects that we're hitting our stride on that, and that we're really starting to see some really good things happening. It's kind of going from good to great, and I really feel like we're getting into that space. So that's one thing. Two is I don't know if we're really at where we need to be with culture and character as part of the 4 Cs. As I read through this, there are things in this report where each school is really diving in and really clear what they're measuring in certain areas, but I still think we're not there with culture and character. And I know we've had discussions about the 4 Cs and what do those things really mean. Is culture safety and respect, or what is character and what does that mean? And so I think as a school board and as a school district, we really need to figure out if 4 Cs are our measures of success, what exactly do those measures mean? And so I know we've got some things that are upcoming that we're looking at that, and we had kind of a group that was going to dive into that, but I'm not sure we're there yet with, if we asked everybody in this room what those things meant, I think everybody would have a different definition. So I would like to see us kind of dive more deeper into that. And then the other piece is the family and community partnerships. I think we do a really good job. What I would also like to see us think more about is how do we get proactive with certain members of the community in terms of partnership, like we're doing with Equity and the Nehemiah Group. I think that's a really important thing. I think we've learned things through this school start time, engaging the community in the work group, and so I don't know if we should spend some more time on being proactive about what segments of our community do we really need to have proactive conversations with, or this piece about social emotional learning. When I hear our administrators talk about that, and then you talk to a general parent, they don't know what social emotional learning is unless they've heard it from their child or they're actively involved in the school district. And I think that's such an important piece about why we're different and what we're doing for our kids. And so is there this piece of educating our parents more about all the good things that we're doing in the school district? Because I'm not sure the average parent knows. And maybe that's more than a newsletter or the Facebook page. So delving deeper into what are the different ways that we can communicate and partner with families and communities. So those are just 2 things that I kind of dove a little bit deeper into, but I echo what the board members say. It's very impressive what's happening in this school district, and you all should be really, really proud.
I jotted down just a few things that I was kind of listening for this time, reflecting on the year before. And so I was really excited to hear Jackie talk about the family outreach events, because we talked about parents knowing about social and emotional awareness more than anything. And I think that's where it starts. It's when their kids are really young. And if we can spend some time with them when their kids are really, when play is a bigger part of their learning process, to have the parents or the families involved in that process, I think is just critical. And so I was very happy to hear, particularly that I think it was 145 hours of family-oriented outreach, which I think is just great, Jackie. So thank you. The elementary schools, the one thing I remembered from a year or almost 2 years ago now is Dawn talking about those in-class interventions and the power of minimizing the in and out activity and the distraction that in and out activity can create in the classroom, not just for the individual student, but for the rest of the class. And what I heard from Dawn and Chris is that that is working. And I think that's will become more apparent as we get into the intermediate school and the middle school, where character was the thing that really rang out. I think you talked a little bit about character being something that I don't know if it's an understanding of what character is, and so it's hard to put a value on it for intermediate and middle school kids, but it's obviously not where we want it to be, and it's hard to have sometimes hard to have great character when you're living in a world like we live today. You know, people look around and there are a lot of very high profile people who don't necessarily aspire to the value of good character. And we have an opportunity as they flow through our district to have an impact on that. And so, again, I don't know if it's about the definition, what is character, and helping people understand how important it is before they can really do something about it. At Rome Corners, name, strength, need. Jason mentioned, I think it was Jason who mentioned that that's what they're striving for, to make sure they have enough time that they spend with those students to know their name, their strength, and their need. And I think that is so valuable, and it does set us apart. So often we have, it's so busy, and they're there for such a short period of time, both at Rome Corners as well as at the middle school, and it's something we're changing for the future, that for 2 years, it's hard to get a foothold on knowing names, strengths, and needs when they're there for such a short period of time. So I'm really pleased to know that the future has a change in that, allows us to have more of a relationship with those kids at a very critical time. Shannon talked about the same thing, that character piece. And we all know how challenging self-awareness can be in middle school. And so helping all of us to be more aware and helping those students to be aware of what character is and what they can do about their own character, how they can affect their own character is just so critical. And lastly, Jim, the one thing I wrote down around the character piece is Jim said we're seeing a reduction in out-of-school suspensions. I'm sorry to pick on it's a positive part of a less positive event, out-of-school suspensions. I know it's the only thing I wrote down here, but it made an impact on me. It tells me that by the time they're getting to high school and getting under your care, Jim, that they want to be there. And that's important. We've had a number of interesting expulsion hearings over the last couple of months. And we just had one very recently, and the one thing that student said was, I just want to be back at school. And so if we can keep kids saying that, even the ones who have to spend a little time away, it's a positive thing. So.
Thanks, Tim. Barb?
First of all, I echo all the positive things that have been said about what we're doing and how we should all feel very good about it. I did have a few specific questions, and I sent them in an email in December, but I'm just going to read from them because I wrote them down when things were fresh in my mind. The first one is for Dr. Anderson, who noted that many of the students who are not at grade level for math and reading are new to OSD. So my question is, what are the prospects for them catching up?
Hello. Thanks for the question. So I think the prospects are good. About half of our students are coming to us below grade level in reading and math this year, for an example. This year we saved some spots in some of our interventions so that we had spaces for them. We're doing a better job of testing them and looking at their CUME folders right away so we can try to get them interventions. But for most of these students, we have to take a whole child approach. And so, yes, they might be below in reading or math, but part of the problem is they're also coming to us with stories, some trauma. So our counselors have been working on getting them services with Lake City and Oregon Mental Health, getting them hooked in with our own counselors, trying to deal with some of the character elements because it's all one piece. So if their brains aren't feeling safe, a lot of them are getting support from the Friends of Oregon if those basic needs aren't being met. So we're really hopeful as they settle into our community. We do have one student this year who's in 7th grade. We're his 13th school. So I hope they'll stay with us because I am confident that if they stay with us through graduation, we're going to be able to help them make the progress that they haven't maybe been able to make before. So we're hopeful.
Okay, thanks.
Does that answer your question?
The next comment was, Mr. Planner, you made a comment about encouraging students towards more rigorous classes. So my question is, how can we ensure that this is not at the expense of students having sufficient downtime or having experiences that will help them grow in other ways, such as extracurriculars or real-world work experiences? I assume there are students who could challenge themselves more academically, but there are also those who push themselves hard, and there is risk that their lives become unbalanced.
So this past week we had our alumni panels. So we had students come from 1, 2, and 3 years beyond Oregon High School, a few even further than that. And we try to get as diverse of a panel as possible. And so there is finding a sweet spot for each kid that comes with knowing kids and trying to provide them with as many different perspectives and as possible. So good information, adults that know them, and then models who they recognize and can hopefully identify something that speaks to them. We do know that, again, our AP, we're an AP honor roll district. We just got notification of that, I think, a week or two ago, which is great. And it shows that our AP participation and our AP achievement has been trending positively, which is great. We heard from our alums that rigor is really important because in your next environments, you're going to be seeing new challenges. And in addition to challenges like time management and how to do your laundry, there's expectations that are very real, and students have to learn a lot about themselves. And so it's good to get those experiences here as well. We also want to strive for balance, and we view the whole child as whether it's, we want you to find your niche and we want you to push yourself. And sometimes in knowing kids, we get a sense for who needs a nudge and who needs a pat on the back. And so it's very nuanced work, I guess. We know that in terms of our AP data, we have more and more students that are taking that risk and being successful. We also know that we have a gap of sorts when we look at our underrepresented groups or our socioeconomic status differences. There's a gap in rigor on different kids' schedules. And so the point of AVID is to prepare students to be successful with more rigor on their schedule with scaffolds around them. And so
do you feel like when you see students or counselors or teachers see students who are overdoing it, they're not getting enough sleep, they're trying to load their schedules up too heavily, and that's inducing too much stress, is somebody talking to them and saying, take it easy here, or let's think this through?
Yeah, we certainly have a steady stream with student services, or I think our administrative team is highly approachable, and we often get contacted by students or parents who the students will say, I'm just really in over my head, and we try to determine, are they accessing the supports and resources that are there for them, or is, for some reason, are they in a spot where they need a change, or they need a schedule change? And so I think we've been very flexible and responsive when we find that there are students that have taken on a lot.
Okay. And then lastly, I think it's last, for the culture question, do we have data by race or ethnicity that shows if students of color are overrepresented in the groups of those who do not feel safe at school? Maybe that's a Leslie question.
It's really the survey.
We don't.
Okay.
We don't have that.
We have
Okay.
been reluctant to disaggregate that data because we have a small minority population, and it could be very personally identifiable.
I guess I meant not for public consumption, but for internal consumption.
We have
It's
some
just a thought.
anecdotal thoughts and
Okay.
ideas on it, but we have not. We don't have any data that we've published. Correct, Leslie?
Okay.
I just think it's important to, I'm sorry if this isn't on, it's important to note that we do get qualitative data from the students when we're in groups with them. When Jim runs the Minority Student Union, or the opportunities that Dr. Bussler and I have had to sit down with a group of students and have them talk about their experiences, in that type of face-to-face environment, they're very willing to share, and I feel we get really valuable qualitative data from those experiences. But the reason that we haven't ever put it on a survey is the anonymity component that Dr. Bussler mentioned.
Yep.
And I think it's actually better in a face-to-face conversation anyway. I think we learn a lot more, and we also begin to develop and further develop some relationships.
Okay, thanks. And this isn't my brilliant thought. I'm just following up on what both Krista and Tim said on the social emotional learning. And it seems like it is a really great idea to, if we can find a way to communicate with parents about the language we're using in the social emotional learning, so they can start using that language at home. And that might really be helpful. And parents might welcome the opportunity to use some of that language or learn some of those techniques. And that's all I have.
Thanks for all the work that you put into doing this. The booklet's a tremendous community piece and a snapshot for our community. As I've said before, for my purposes as a board member, it doesn't quite get the total data that I'd like. I know board members are different in terms of how much data they want to get, but from an oversight standpoint, I like to see more. I really like the high school annual report, that amount of data and how it's presented, and the ability to look between different data points and see where there are differences that they are. And I know, Jim, you're working within a framework on the redefining ready sort of model at the high school. And next Tuesday, I think Leslie, Jim, and I are going to a pre-convention workshop that's going to be about 3 or 4 hours talking about that. That will be interesting to see where that is and what accountability model, how that accountability model looks like. Because I know we've had struggles looking at the character and culture and community component and the 4 C's. And I want to see if that gives us some guidance as we continue our discussion about what our measures are like. I think when we heard from the leadership teams, one of the comments that was made from the lower levels is that we really need to look what's happening at the high school, because if that's going to be what overall at the district we're shooting for in terms of measurement and success, we ought to be on the same path and arcway getting to that consistently. And so I'm looking forward to Tuesday to do that. With that, I was able to look. I like the disaggregated data that was in the high school report, and the different types of data that we got to measure school-wide data. So one of the notes I had with elementary is, just out of curiosity, every year the State Journal prints the forward exam numbers, and I'd like to see how those relate to the STAR and Rigby and Fountains Pinella data that we got. I know you guys do that. I know you look at that in your groups before you come here. I want to hear more about that in terms of, we've got these standardized tests and the report cards out there, and what are we seeing? I'd like to hear, what are we seeing regarding the data that's reported to Oregon and what we really think's going on with our kids? Because our papers going way back have said that snapshot in time isn't necessarily accurate for us, and so we tend to put that to the side, but it does provide us with a way to triangulate in terms of what's going on. So for me, that's important data. The 4K presentation, one of the things that I was curious about was, what are the numbers for the students that are entering kindergarten? What are those foundation numbers compared to those who take 4K? And how does that group compare as we move through elementary school? Is there a difference that we see? Does 4K drive the needle long term or not? Okay. And if so, do we start earlier then? Okay with that. And so that's a data point that's really interesting to me with that. I think I understand the reluctance to report out disaggregated data because of our small percentage of those who are either in the low socioeconomic group, are of color, or have learning issues, okay? But I think it is important for us to see as a board whether there are gaps there. And we used to see that data, and there are gaps. And if there are gaps, I think we need to recognize those. Okay, we didn't hear anything about that, and that I think we need to see that and what the strategies are. Because I know you're doing it. I know you know what they are, and I know that they're out there. And I know that we're dealing with it. But I think as a report to the board, we should be seeing that. At OMS, we talked about the STEAM popularity, which was really intriguing to me about that, because that's really a project-based learning model. And we've talked about project-based learning in Visioning for the Future and in the Path Forward as a model that not only guides us in STEAM, but overall in terms of an educational philosophy. So the fact that so many of our students are gravitating towards project-based learning classes informs me that that's a popular model in terms of delivery of curriculum and assessment of curriculum at all levels. That's all I had. I have a couple specific questions that I can address to individual folks at a later time. But I think we have really come along, as you know, Courtney and I go way back in terms of, we were talking about, who was it? Who's the guy? Reeves. Doug Reeves. Way back. I mean, from where we've come with talking about Doug Reeves and how we move from accountability. This is really good. I think what we're talking about tonight is, what's the next step forward in this evolution. I think we're going to get that with our continued conversations about the 4 Cs and what type of data would be relevant for that. Okay. Did that spawn any further comments? Krista.
It's interesting you talk about kind of the longitudinal of 4K, and I would put social emotional learning in that conversation too. That I was having a conversation with Erin tonight, who's a freshman in college, and she really didn't have a lot of social emotional learning in her K-12 experience because it was relatively new, and so she didn't really know what I was talking about. And the difference to compare that to Sean, who's in 8th grade, or somebody who's younger, and then talking with Scott, who's now coaching Sean's 8th grade basketball team, and are we carrying that to co-curriculars? because there's a lot of carryover in terms of coaching kids who are playing basketball who get upset, and how are they recognizing that, and are they acting out? And so there's this piece of, are we carrying this to all the things that our district touches? And then are we measuring, because we're starting 4K now, and what about when these kids get to 8th grade, and is that impacting our behavioral? Is that impacting how successful they are in school? So I think we have to look at these things on a longitudinal basis, and as a board, that's really interesting to me. If we're carrying it across the district, and then what's the impact as kids go through their K-12 experience here. So that's based on kind of what you're talking about with 4K.
Anything else?
Oh,
Something after Troy.
Yep.
okay. Sorry. And on that same note, I guess, like, how do we measure it? So, is it, because it's more than academics, so how do we, and I don't know the answer, but is there a way that we can measure the impact of all of the great things we're doing with SEL?
That's a good point. My point's off that topic, going back to what you said, Steve, your comment about increased interest in project-based learning and STEAM in particular. And I don't know if anyone else saw the article in the paper, it was either today or yesterday, about the top 10 careers for the future. And almost all of them were engineering, project-based, artificial intelligence, things, and specific types of engineering. I don't recall what they were exactly right now. But I reflected on going back years ago to when we used to talk about how we have to start preparing kids for jobs that don't exist now. And I was really struck by that. And so the concept of kids being interested in project-based learning really dovetails well with what trends setters are seeing in terms of jobs of the future. I thought that was really interesting. So just a note.
Dr. Bussler, anything you want to share, or are we good to move on? Is it helpful? Or?
Sure, a couple of quick comments. What we typically do when we receive the board's feedback on the student achievement report is we'll spend time in an administrative team meeting. Likely it's more than one, once or twice before the end of the school year, and reflect on all the comments that we've heard. Barb, we did have your questions, so I preloaded those to the administrators. That's why you received such a great specific answer to that. In terms of a general comment for the board and the community, both the board and the community can feel confident in terms of what we're providing from an academic, a behavioral, a social and emotional outcomes for students. When you look at us as a district on whatever measure it is, whether it's the state exam or our internal assessments, our kids score exceptionally well, and they score well. Now, that doesn't mean there aren't gaps, and that doesn't mean there's not opportunity for improvement, but overall, our kids have historically scored well and have found success. Now, the key with our continuous improvement mindset is how can we raise that? And how can we raise that and make it even better? That's the challenge that the administrative team and our school staff look at every day. And it's one that we will continue to review. So your comments are always helpful. They give us an opportunity to reflect and to focus our work. I'd like to think that our work, while it's not all standardized, we have a laser-like focus on improving. And whether that's at the elementary level, at RCI, the middle school, or the high school, or our OASIS program, we have been committed, boards have been committed in the district to continuous improvement dating back 40 years. That is the key to our future success.
Okay, that will conclude the conversation on that topic. We'll move to superintendent's report.
I have good news for you tonight. I had 4 items, but now I have 3. I just gave you one of those items. The 2020 school board election is set for Tuesday, April 7th. We have 3 candidates in Area 2, Kevin Mehring and Heather Garrison. And recall, this is the first year of the apportionment, and this will be a test on how well I listened to Gina. The top vote getter in Area 2 will have a 3-year seat, and the remaining candidate will have a 1-year seat.
2 year.
A 2-year seat. Oh. Okay, thank you for that, for giving me a growth mindset. And we have one remaining candidate in Area 3, Mr. LeBrun, and that is a 3-year seat. Or is it 6?
It's 3.
Oh, okay. That is officially a 3-year seat. Second item, the district is set with the work group, and I want to offer a thank you to the board for getting together last week to finalize the charge for the work group. And Steve and I did some work as we prepared, I think it's almost 20 community members now. We made a couple of little additions, one that the OEA suggested to us last Thursday morning at our leaders meeting, and either Steve, Leslie, or myself have contacted everyone, and for everyone we contacted, everyone said yes, which is not a surprise. I've come to learn that's the answer that we get when we reach out to community members. Leslie and I have also been working with Joe Donovan. We gave Steve an update this last week, and Mr. Donovan, I know many of you are familiar with him. He's working with us sort of in the background on agendas and on meeting dates, and we have 4 meeting dates already scheduled, and we will be back to the board with the report from the work group at the February board meeting. So we are excited and looking forward to that being launched. And then the last item is a bit of a story, and I share this story because it's not about the Oregon School District, but it is something we never deal with. And maybe we dealt with it years and years ago. I was at a legislative session this last Friday morning listening to legislators talk about the next state budget. Yes, there's another one coming, and some challenges at the state level with funding. And one of the superintendents stopped the legislators and said, I'd like to share a little story about a classroom visit that I made this last week. He was in a school that's about 65 years old, and he sat in the back of a 4th grade classroom along with 4 or 5 students. I think he was in the middle. They were on both of his sides, and the teacher had a perfect lesson planned that day, and initially he thought it was just himself, that he couldn't quite hear the lesson. And as the lesson continued, he noticed that the students on his left and the students on his right, while they weren't disruptive, he had a sense that they were off task because they couldn't hear the teacher either. And it wasn't anything that the teacher was doing. It's the fact that they're in a school that's 65 years old. They have about 14,000 kids in the district, and they're very tight on money. And this 65-year-old school has a 65-year-old boiler. And I know while that might make us happy that a boiler would last 65 years, the HVAC system simply does not work. And I think of the challenges that those young children have in that particular classroom. So he went to another classroom and he thought, oh, I wonder if it was just in this classroom where it was located in the building. And he stopped in 3 or 4 more classrooms and noticed that in the back of the room, all of those classrooms were noisy and very difficult for young people to hear. He went on to say they're a school district that offers summer school. So in May, June, and July, the temperatures can frequently get to 90 degrees and on some days 95 degrees in the classroom. And it just caused me to pause. That's something we never deal with. And this is a district that's less than 30 miles away from us, and it shows the variability and the variety of support and quality of school facilities that districts have across the state. It made me feel good that we never think of super hot weather as a deterrent to education because we have the benefit of air conditioning in all of our schools. We don't think of heating systems being so loud that our students can't learn, but there are districts in the state that have that challenge and have such a big backlog of school facility issues that it's really hard. Now they're going to a referendum, and I hope their referendum is successful, but it's just a reminder, there are a lot of districts in the state and we have to work collaboratively with all of our districts so all of our kids get the best education possible. That concludes my report, unless any of you have a question for me.
Thanks, Brian. Future agenda, I don't think we've got one drafted up. We haven't worked on that yet. We'll be working on that probably next week when we're over
Yes.
at the conference. So if anybody has anything on the agenda for the 2nd January meeting, let us know. Check out. Barb, anything? Tim? Krista? Courtney? Troy? Anna? Okay, I just got one thing. In the paper on Saturday, December 28th, was the annual comparison of taxes that's done by the State Journal. They take a look at fair comparison on tax review of all the districts in Dane County based on a home worth valued at $250,000. I'm doing a spreadsheet on it. I didn't get it done, but once again, Oregon, the village and those in the Oregon School District are on the low end of taxes for $250,000 homes. Notwithstanding the support that we've gotten for facilities and teacher referendums, or teacher compensation, and the good things that we do for students, we're still providing a quality dollar education on that. So I'll get that put together for a future meeting, but I just wanted to reference that for us. Okay, at this time, we're going to recess the board to go over into the side room. We're going to go into closed session. We will not return to open session. So thanks, everyone, for coming. Huh? Okay.